Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. It's TheSketchMonkey here, and today is a special one. We're gonna talk about the Audi RS2 and modernize this legend into something that could be built today. I love the Audi RS2. I have a lot of memories with it from old street races from when I was a kid. We used to go to these street races in the secluded industrial area where after hours, of course, no businesses were open, but they still had this long stretch of road with no traffic, and that's where these cars used to meet up and race against each other. I remember the RS2 coming up right next to a BMW M3 E36, and I thought it was gonna be a easy race for the M3 to win, of course. Here comes a blue Audi station wagon, basically an Audi 80 is what it looked like. Station wagon up against a BMW M3. The light goes green, and guess what happens? The Audi launches itself forward. Oh, I can remember the whole front end lift up as it took off. And that quattro traction just put that 315 horsepower onto the ground as it took off. It was a very clear memory that I remember still to this day. Now, the 0 to 60 time of the RS2 is impressive with 4.9 seconds, but as I said, it's the launch that really sets the RS2 apart. 0 to 30 miles per hour, just think about this. And this is in a Audi Avant, takes 1.5 seconds. That's faster, that's quicker, 0 to 30, than a McLaren F1, which is just nuts. And it just speaks to how effective this quattro system is, and of course the genius of German engineering. But I want to show you something. I want to show you the problem that I see with, or I don't want to call it a problem, but it's kind of a letdown with current modern wagons. So this RS2 here, it's unapologetically a wagon. It's an Avant, as they call it in Audi language. But as we go further, closer to the models and the RS4 that we have today, it starts to become a little bit more like it's trying to hide the coolness of being an Avant, and it's turning into more, the rear end is becoming more and more slopey, more like a coupe. So have a look here, for example. This is a perfect picture of this lineup here. We have, of course, the beautiful RS2 right here, and then my favorite of any RS model from Audi of all time, the RS4, the B5 Avant right there. I love everything about this car. It's such a cool looking car with the widened stance, with the widened fenders, and these 18-inch RS wheels just look fantastic. It's probably one of my favorite wheels from Audi ever, the ones that sit on the RS4 here. I remember seeing this as a kid in a showroom, and just being close to this car was magic. It was that kind of magic that I think unfortunately becomes lost when you grow older, because as a kid and you see this type of cars and you're into cars, you're just looking at them and just being in the presence of these cars is you feel some sort of magic towards these type of cars. And I remember seeing this exactly like this in red with the silver side mirrors and these 18-inch Audi wheels here, sitting like this in the showroom, and I thought, wow, that is a beautiful looking car. Even though it was an Avant in Sweden, station wagons are pretty common, so I didn't think, anything of it. It was just a cool car in general. I still think today this is definitely my favorite RS model of them all. And then we come into some late 2000 models here. Then what I want to focus on is this area right here. So you can see it still keeps pretty sharp Avant lines in the rear, wagon lines, and then you come to the modern one and you can see that it's sloping here now. We don't have the typical sharpness corner in the rear end, and to me that's just a shame. It's like it's trying to hide the fact that it is a station wagon instead of being proud of being a station wagon. And to me, when you do this halfway, I think when you do something, you should always do it 100%. You shouldn't stop at 80, 75. Let's just round it off a little bit in the rear end and make it more acceptable and less of a wagon and more of a coupe line. If it is a wagon, especially if you have this tradition here, as you can see, just keep this going with the new models. You have, I don't know how many other models you can turn into coupes and SUV coupes and sedans and four-door coupes or crossovers or whatever you have it. But if you're gonna have a wagon, just stick to the wagon rear end and make it a proper almost 90-degree Volvo 740 rear with the wagon here, like you have on the previous RS models right here. So let me show you exactly why I'm such a fan of station wagons, and I think they are beautiful, in some cases even more so than the regular sedan or the coupe. And it all comes down to lines, of course, and the longer the lines, the more longer lines you can have in your car, the better, in my opinion. And I think Rosie here agrees on that as well. But anyway, now I'm gonna sketch out exactly what I mean so you can easily understand it. So let's say we have a coupe up here. Just make a regular coupe, and I'm using a big pen here and a regular print paper, cheap print paper. So let's put out the wheelbase like this, and then try to figure out the 2 key lines that comes with each single version of these proportions here. So we're gonna sketch a coupe up here, something like this, and then we have the greenhouse starting maybe around there. Looks pretty decent. And then of course it just dips down over the rear axle into the rear part of the car, and the shoulder line usually goes up a little bit over this area right here to create that muscly feel that you have in coupes, something like that. This is the traditional 2-door coupe style proportions of a car. So what you have here is you have one or 2 lines, I think we can say 2 lines that are stretched the full width of the car, and 2 long lines. That would be, first of all, you have the baseline right here. So the baseline starts right about here and then stretches all the way to the rear of the car right there. And then you have, of course, on top of that, the shoulder line, which is also a very long, distinct line. Usually they are unbroken or smooth on large coupes like this, and it looks very beautiful when you have long lines like these 2 right here. And then you have the greenhouse, which is, of course, since it's a 2-door coupe, it's going to be a bend or a lot of curvatures in this line right here, which is fine. It looks cool. And then we can, of course, add in some details to this to make it look like a proper car before we move on to the next one right here. So that's the coupe style car that we have right here. It's a beautiful car, very clean. Usually when you have the larger the coupe, I think the more beautiful it becomes, because the lines are stretched out, and the more stretched out the lines are, the more unbroken they are. To me, at least, the more beautiful the car gets. So now, if we go into, I'm gonna skip the sedan because it's almost the same sense as a coupe, but let's have a wagon down here now, and let's see what happens when we sketch a wagon and why I think some wagons are so beautiful. I think you can kind of start to maybe figure it out, since we're talking about long unbroken lines, and that means that we have the baseline right here. This is line number 1, and then we have the shoulder line for a wagon, something like this, stretches all the way there. And now here comes the fun part, and what makes a wagon is the stretched out greenhouse in the back specifically. So the A-pillar starts as regular, like you would have with any sedan, or maybe not coupe, but sedan. But here we have, it doesn't dip directly, it stretches further back and creates another beautiful long line like that before it dips somewhere here. And this, of course, makes a traditional looking wagon like this. And what I like about this format is that now, instead of having 2 lines that stretches almost the entire length of the car, meaning the baseline down here and the shoulder line in the middle of the car, now we have even a 3rd line that stretches far behind the rear axle and creates a beautiful looking design, in my opinion, because as I said, the longer the lines you have on the car, to me, the more beautiful, usually, typically, it's like a bit of a rule, universal rule, that the longer the lines and the less broken they are, to me, the more beautiful the car becomes. And it's so easy to make this with wagons, because you have the extended roofline up there And especially if you look at some of the wagons today, if I had to pick a favorite, and it's not just because it's Swedish, it's because it's such a clean design. The king of the wagons right now has to be Volvo when it comes to styling. It's such a clean design. It has some pureness to it that I think is both stylish. It's kind of, the lack of styling makes it more stylish, if that makes sense. It's very Nordic, very Scandinavian, very clean, stripped down, with a strong focus on clear proportions, and that's something I think Volvo is doing specifically well right now these days with the V90 and the S90 as well. Just beautiful looking cars. But that's what I wanted to show you here real quick with these fun sketches. Just to make a point of why I prefer most cases wagons before sedans, for example. Sedans are also beautiful, but they are very hard to make beautiful because you have a different kind of proportions. The hardest cars to make beautiful to me are both either convertibles, because then you don't have a greenhouse line to play around with to add to the proportions of the car. That line is completely gone. But still, you can play around with the base of the car, of course, and make a beautiful convertible. The second type of car that is really hard to make beautiful are hatchbacks, because all of the lines are so squished in that it looks weird. But one really, really good looking hatchback that I like right now is I think it is the Toyota Corolla hatchback, the new one. It looks fantastic, and I saw one the other day out on the highway in the sport trim, and I thought the rear end of that car is one of the most beautiful hatchbacks I've ever seen, and it took me by surprise just how well it works in the new Toyota Corolla to have it in a hatchback, specifically with the sport package, and the wheels in that car make such a difference. So, let's have a look at the RS2 here. This is the angle I'm going to use for the redesign, and I absolutely love that this is, of course, developed with Porsche. You can see the Porsche wheels here. It's so cool that they have the Porsche wheels on an Audi A8 Avant. Porsche took this car, an Audi A8 Avant, went nuts with the suspension and engineering in it, and this RS2 is the result. I just love the fact that they made crazy stuff like this back in the day, and I hope it never stops. These weird collaborations that we sometimes see and are graced with in the automotive world. So what I want to keep here is, graphically, I want to keep this part right here. I think this is typical for this era of Audi. You see it in the Audi 80, both the sedan and the Avant, and the coupe as well, and the Audi 100 as well. So this light bar here, or light reflex bar that you have right there, I want to keep that. But the internals, of course, needs to be updated to make it look modern, because this looks very, very, very 80s. Looking at it like this, we need some new graphic LEDs, so I have to design the LEDs inside of this thing and figure out how to make that work. I also want to widen the body of the car, so I want to have it maybe end somewhere around this point, so stretch it out just a little bit, and that will make it modern. And these wheels, although they are cool, I want to try and put maybe some modern RS4 wheels onto this car, or I'm gonna try and do that, but I think in the end I'm going to go back to the most beautiful RS wheels of Audi of all time, the RS4 B5 wheels. I love those. I think it's going to suit this specific style of the car, because it's a very clean style, and I think those wheels, multi-spokes, are very clean. They're kind of sharp, but you have some roundness on the separate spokes as well, and that's kind of exactly the same style that you have all over the rest of the car, so it's going to blend well. But I'm going to try a couple of wheels. Might change this last second. We're gonna have to see about that. Other than that, is just removing these 80s manufacturing methods that we see. For example, this massive line here between the bumper and the rest of the body that goes into the side here as well. This has to go, and these lines down here has to go. We need another diffuser in the lower part of the car. More aggressive, of course, dual exhausts. There are a lot of things we need to change on this car. And with that said, let's get to work and let's see how this RS2 modernization will turn out. And hopefully, Audi, if you see this, please make something cool like this again. I love the RS6. Take it back a notch. Maybe make an M2 competitor, M2 Avant or something like that competitor. And maybe I'm gonna give you some ideas here. But let's get in and let's get going with the redesign. Alright guys, so here it is, my modern version of the Audi RS2. I think this turned out fantastic. I love the rear graphics of the lights here. It worked well with the light bar, even though it's a bit high on the original. It makes it I think it works because the height of the original taillights are they take up a big space of the rear end. That gives us a lot more real estate to play around with lights like this and the insides of the lights, and I think it worked out great here with the structured elements of the parts that are inside of this light bar right here. And of course, widen it was one of the big changes I wanted to make, because that will obviously make it look more modern and also make it look more planted on the ground. With these fat tires that you could see I changed in the last second, I went back to my original thoughts with the RS4 B5 wheels, and I think that was the best choice I could have made compared to the black wheels. As you know, I'm not a really big fan of black wheels. Specifically, if you're going to do an RS2 modernization, you can't have black wheels on that. Either you have some Porsche styling wheels or the RS4 B5. Those are pretty much the only options you have if you're going to modernize the RS2. Keeping some of the original styling for the car, for example, the way that you have the greenhouse going, I didn't want to change that. I wanted to make it into a proper wagon and keep it as a wagon. Maybe a little slope, a little curvature up here in this corner, but that's it. I'm not gonna make it into a coupe. It's not gonna try and be something else than a wagon, and I'm really happy with how this turned out. I'm TheSketchMonkey. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Take care.